Good afternoon and welcome to TVP World, coming to you live from Warsaw. My name is Alex Simlinski and these are the latest updates in the world news. Sweden's Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson says the country is investigating yet another possible breach of an undersea cable in the Baltic Sea. If confirmed, it could be the latest target of Russia's hybrid war against the West.
On patrol in the Baltic as part of NATO's beefed-up security to protect against Russian sabotage of Western seabed infrastructure. It's emerged, though, that another cable may have been damaged, according to Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson.
I've been aware for some time of the media reports about a possible new cable break in the Baltic Sea. The government is being kept informed by the relevant authorities who are investigating what has happened. We take all reports of possible damaged infrastructure in the Baltic Sea very seriously. As I said earlier, they must be seen in the context of the serious security situation that exists.
In January, Sweden's security services seized a Malta-flagged bulk carrier. It was suspected of damaging a fibre optic cable between Latvia and Sweden. In late December, Finnish authorities boarded an oil tanker travelling from Russia on suspicion it had breached an undersea power cable and 3 internet links connecting Finland and Estonia. The AP news agency reported earlier this year that 11 Baltic cables have been damaged in the past 15 months. Despite the increased NATO naval presence in the Baltic Sea, underwater infrastructure remains vulnerable.
According to Lithuanian Prime Minister Gintautas Paluckas, a delegation from the Baltic states will travel to Washington, D.C. to attempt to explain the geopolitical situation in Eastern Europe to Donald Trump and his administration. Asked about the war in Ukraine, the Lithuanian Prime Minister went on to say that only NATO and the European Union in conjunction can guarantee security for the war-torn country.
We actually agreed, and we're planning the visit of 3 prime ministers of Baltic states to United States, Washington, just to try to reach heirs of Mr. Donald Trump and to explain the real situation we are facing, real threats, and also to maintain their troops and their attention to this region, to Baltic states especially. First, we need to ensure that we have Ukraine just negotiating with Russia and United States on the equal basis, because otherwise we will not be able to ensure that Ukraine's interests are represented during these peace negotiations. It's a crucially important fact that we have to take care of. Now, the second so-called step is to ensure the security guarantees. Security guarantees might be ensured only by NATO and European Union working together.
And staying on the topic of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy will not sign anything that does not give Ukraine reliable security guarantees. The statement came after yesterday's talks between the Ukrainian president and U.S. envoy for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg. Here's a report from our correspondent in the Ukrainian capital, Oz Chatterjee, who's bringing you the latest information from Kyiv.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy struck a positive tone regarding his meeting with the U.S. Special Envoy for Ukraine and Russia, Keith Kellogg, in Kyiv on Thursday. This is despite the press conference that was supposed to be held after that meeting being cancelled at the U.S. request. Let's take a listen to what President Zelenskyy had to say about that meeting with Keith Kellogg.
General Kellogg, our talks restore hope. We need strong agreements with America, agreements that really work. I gave instructions to work fast and even-handedly. Economic interests and security interests should always go hand in hand, and the details of the agreement are important. The better the details are drafted, the better the result. We spoke with General Kellogg about the front line, the need to free all our prisoners of war who are held in Russia, and also the necessity of a reliable and well-defined system of security guarantees so the war doesn't return and Russians are no longer able to hurt civilians. We all need peace. Ukraine, Europe, America, everyone in the world.
Now, we also understand that there are some frustrations in the White House that Zelenskyy did not sign the mineral deal that was put before him, the Ukrainians feel that deal did not guarantee the kinds of things that Ukraine was looking for in signing this kind of deal. Now, the National Security Advisor Mike Waltz spoke about this in a press conference given on Thursday. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Our own Secretary of Treasury personally made the trip to offer the Ukrainians what can only be described as a historic opportunity. That is for America to co-invest with Ukraine in their minerals, in their resources, to truly grow the pie. So, case in point, there's a foundry that processes aluminum in Ukraine. It's been damaged. It's not at its current capacity. If that is restored, it would account for America's entire imports of aluminum for an entire year.
So Zelensky's still trying to strike a positive tone despite not signing the agreement that Donald Trump wanted him to sign. Keith Kellogg still striking a positive tone despite the words coming from Donald Trump and the White House aimed at Zelensky. However, it should be said Keith Kellogg was not present in those meetings between Russian officials and US officials in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. So it does question where his position is going forward and how much he actually speaks for the US president, who is currently engaged in a very fiery war of words directed at the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who himself has proved that he's not willing to sign any kind of deal that he feels do not respect Ukraine's rights and guarantee their security going forward. Zos Katerji reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said that the EU should finance its aid to Ukraine from frozen Russian assets. He also once again called for the EU to invest heavily in its defense and security.
Enough talking. It's time to act. First, let's finance our aid for Ukraine from the Russian frozen assets. Second, let's strengthen air policing, the Baltic Sea and the EU borders with Russia. Third, let's swiftly adopt new fiscal rules to finance the EU security and defense. Now!
The EU's chief diplomat, Kaja Kallas, has said that interactions between the US and Russia show Moscow has not given up its territorial aspirations in Ukraine. In an interview at the G20 summit in South Africa, Kallas went on to say that appeasing Vladimir Putin would send a dangerous signal to dictators and aggressors around the globe.
What we understand from those interactions that they have had with the Americans, they haven't given up their goals. They want to have the maximum, and plus, on top of it, they also want the international. They want to be in the international arena again, like nothing has happened before. So I mean, let us be very, very. Let us understand what kind of signal we are sending if we are giving everything on the plate to the aggressor. It sends a signal to all the aggressors in the world that you can do this, because they will offer you on top of it something else.
Hungary has threatened to block the rollover of EU sanctions on Russian individuals, claiming the extension of restrictions could hurt Russia-Ukraine peace talks. The announcement was made by Hungary's Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó yesterday in Washington, and today Brussels is forced to wade through the potential consequences. EU correspondent Angela Skujins reports.
Late yesterday, it was announced that Hungary's Foreign Affairs Minister Péter Szijjártó has threatened to veto EU sanctions against Russia. According to a post on social media platform X, he was particularly critical of the rollover of sanctions targeting thousands of individuals with frozen assets as well as travel bans. Foreign Affairs ministers on Monday are expected to vote on the rollover of those sanctions. Unless they're extended, they wrap up on March the 10th. He said that he was particularly critical of the measure, as he said that it could hinder EU as well as US and Russia and Ukraine ceasefire negotiations. Also on the table on Monday is the 16th sanction package from the EU targeting Russia. This includes a ban of aluminium imports as well as revoking at least 8 broadcasting licenses from organisations, as well as new vessels suspected of being part of Russia's murky shadow fleet. But it is only the morning here in Brussels. We're expecting a formal comment from some of those other member states and those delegations. But that meeting is, of course, days away. A lot can happen between now and then. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
Mass demonstrations are expected in Slovakia today, with protests against the government of Prime Minister Robert Fico and gatherings paying tribute to the memory of murdered Slovak journalist Jan Kuciak. Our correspondent Paweł Trzaskowski is on site.
It might seem a day like any other in Bratislava, the capital of Slovakia. However, the city, along with many others in the country, will probably grind to a halt in late afternoon hours today. And this is because on this date, exactly 7 years ago, a young investigative journalist, Jan Kuciak, was murdered along with his fiancée Martina Kusnirova. And they were murdered most likely because Kuciak was investigating the connections of the then government of Robert Fico with Italian mafia. That was the first murder of a journalist in the history of Slovakia, and it sparked mass protests that eventually forced Fico to resign from his post of Prime Minister. But he returned to the post after the 2023 elections, and this return was full of controversies. Most recently, in December last year, Fico paid a surprising visit to the Kremlin, where he met with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, who Fico said is being wrongfully demonized by the West. There were even talks that Slovakia could become a potential territory for peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. And this sparked another wave of protests of dissatisfaction from the Slovak society. And today we are about to see a culmination of this dissatisfaction, and we will be here to cover these events for you. From Bratislava, Slovakia, for TVP World, I'm Paweł Trzaskowski.
And with that report from our correspondent in Slovakia, we conclude this edition of the World News. Thanks for watching, but as always, do stay tuned to TVP World for more breaking news and updates.